Let's make one thing clear. There are three things that hook me into playing a video game. Its fun factor, its soundtrack, and its boss battles. Seriously, boss battles make or break most video games I play. They are that ultimate test of all the gameplay mechanics I've been tinkering with since the tutorial levels. Nothing is more rewarding than taking to the skies with a space dragon, fending a giant leviathan away from the ship, or taking down a massive colossus that I just scaled for the past 30 minutes. I know it's quite close-minded, but games without boss battles do not appeal to me nearly as much as those that do. So, here's a tribute to some of the most unique and fearsome bosses around. We're going to count off some of the most creative designs, the easiest as well as the hardest, the scariest, the most memorable, and the staple bosses that you seem to find in every video game. So, let's get started. Now the point of the boss is to test you on your skills in the game, a monstrous NPC that gives you quite the challenge. This goes for most bosses, minus the first one. Traditionally, the first boss should be a cakewalk as long as you understand the control scheme. Not much strategy goes into facing one of these guys, just attack, block, and use whatever early skills are available to you. This is best used in a Mario or Kirby game, the best example being Wispy Woods. Now Wispy Woods is a trademark Kirby boss for one reason only. He doesn't serve as a challenge, but you can pretty much defeat him with any ability. I find Wispy Woods as a sort of punching bag that I can use to try out each of Kirby's abilities, and try and master the ones that are a lot harder to use. This tactic isn't effective if used on Krako or Acro, but killing a boss multiple ways is definitely enjoyable. But I think the game that does first bosses the best is God of War. In each God of War, you start off fighting a huge titan of a boss right from the start, which perfectly blends into the tutorial level. The only downside is the games rarely exceed from this point. In fact, my favorite bits of these games are the opening boss fights, whereas the ending ones are a bit lackluster. We'll probably get back to that in another video. My favorite is the Colossus of Rhodes from God of War 2. The entire level, this giant is hunting you down, and Kratos must try and fend him off while he tries to fix this sticky situation he just got zapped into. The Colossus isn't hard, but gives you a nice blend of quick-time events and combo attacks. Also, unlike the Hydra from God of War 1, the Colossus is composed of multiple parts. His hand reaches in through the window, his foot comes crashing through the wall, and in the climax of the battle you explore the inside of the Colossus. Badass! This is how you introduce a game, with a boss battle that wishes to crush your skull from the moment you skip the opening cutscene. Now some games, they don't have that distinct first boss. The Mega Man series, for example, lets you choose which boss to take on first based on the current equipment you obtained up to this point. Some of them are easy to dispose of with your standard equipment, while others are less of a hassle when you smack them down with their weakness. This weakness is rewarded to you by one of the other robots. Though sometimes it's cheap to consistently freeze Spark Mandrill until he's blown to smithereens, it's quite rewarding when you take them down with nothing more than your regular blaster. Some games demand you to use a specific item or weapon to defeat the boss. In Gauntlet Dark Legacy, a classic arcade dungeon crawler, each boss is actually a pain in the ass to face as soon as you have access to its area. Instead, the game encourages you to explore for a legendary weapon that can cripple the boss found by exploring another realm. This makes you strategize, grind, and search every unturned rock for these powerful weapons. Taking the Chimera, the boss of Realm 3, without the Scimitar of Decapitation found in Realm 5, it is suicidal to say the least. But no other series makes this more common than the Zelda series, especially in those 3D installments. In each dungeon, Link finds a useful sub-weapon which happens to be the boss's big weakness. Using the boomerang on Barnade helps stun the boss long enough to get a taste of your blade. Now this is really cool in some cases, but I'm going to be honest, I've grown sick of it. I mean, the biggest problem to me with Twilight Princess was its boss battles. Not the designs of the bosses, no, those were amazing. The problem lies in the battles themselves. The fights are way too rinse and repeat, and you can render one boss in particular defenseless by quickly doing the same pattern throughout the entire fight. I miss having A Link to the Past or the Oracle games. You could use the weapon to make the battle easier, but it didn't automatically render the boss defenseless every time you struck it with a hammer. This is one problem I hope is improved with Skyward Sword. Inspired by Zelda, an open-world adventure game decided to go full force and make a game entirely composed of bosses. I'm of course talking about Shadow of the Colossus. Taking down 16 unique colossi has become an iconic staple in video game history, thanks to saving the princess in another castle and putting the last Metroid in captivity. In Shadow of the Colossus, we have to scale these beasts of the land, sea, and sky, even the sands. These take up to an hour to master. It's all about holding on tight and using what few accessories you have with you, the beam of your sword, your bow, and your trusty steed. Never had a single aspect of a video game feel so fresh, but it seems almost impossible to mimic correctly. I mean, here we go. Castlevania Lords of Shadows has 3 of these boss fights, and they're boring. The battle areas are enclosed, the bosses don't really do much, and the only strategy is climb and stab. There's more to that in Shadow of the Colossus. You actually feel the means to strategize when facing some of those titans, or you would be squished in seconds. In Lords of Shadow, the bosses look big, they look menacing, but they are all show. There's absolutely zero enjoyment when taking on these 3 stooges. It's not like Castlevania wasn't capable of good boss fights. I mean, just take a look at Rondo of Blood. These bosses had rather random patterns and kept you quick on your toes. Even when you thought the boss was defeated, they would pull one last ace from their sleeve and do a devastating attack just before they kicked the bucket. Now, there's 2 games that come to mind to me are the perfection of boss battles. In these games, the entire battle is a strategy that builds upon one another. Gradually, you feel the boss get less threatening and more desperate to kill you. And oftentimes, these bosses completely change strategy to tear you apart. The first that comes to mind is the Metroid Prime series. Now that it's been revealed that Metroid Prime is in fact my favorite Metroid game, it should be no surprise that I absolutely love their boss battles. Thardus is a boss that requires you to use a large portion of your equipment to make it even remotely possible of taking down this titan. The Ridley fight literally got me sweating in the final phase where his wings are torn up and I have only 3 health tanks remaining. I was nervous, I was careful, and when I shot, I made sure I made a mark. More games need boss battles that build up as they proceed and require more than just a repetitive process, button mashing, or worse than all, a stupid QuickTime event. God, I hate those. The second game that comes to mind, Ys. I'm sorry, what? Oh, it's a very cool Japanese JRPG, kind of like Zelda on steroids. Check it out. You can get pretty much all of them on the PSP. Well, 2 of them. 3? Yeah, 3. I never fought bosses more desperate to pull out every last-ditch effort to kill me within the last 1,000 health points than I did with the Ys series. The bosses themselves are puzzles, and you really have to be quick to dodge some of these unbelievable attacks. Check this out. In Ys 7, which I recommend every fan of a JRPG, play it. You fight this large dragon that requires you to break the barriers around its legs. Once they have been shattered, the boss crashes into the mountainside, which you must scale, and attack the crystal upon its forehead, while he's shooting lasers at you. Once you finish, the next phase is the most awesome thing in video game history. This dragon chases you down a corridor, firing lasers, fireballs, attempting to stomp the shit out of you. You have to run away from this boss, dodge its consistent attacks, and take him down in this nut house that you have to play to believe. Video games need to have boss battles more like this. Cinematic battles, yeah, save those for the movies. I like strategy, and I like the bosses to get more serious as I take them down. It really gets me pumped when I get immersed in the battle. Well, that's the first part of this tribute. When we come back, I'm going to count down my top 5 easiest bosses and my top 5 hardest bosses. See you then.